My name is Arjan Warges and I work for a DSO in Nexus, and I also work for Elad. I work in the innovation department of the DSO, and my focus is electric mobility, how these electric vehicles are impacting our grids and what we can do about this. A DSO, that's a company who takes care of the underground infrastructure. So it has to provide enough transport capacity and has to make new connections to companies and also to charging stations when there is a need for. My EV is a company car, my company Nexus I think sustainability is quite important, and it provides 10% or 50% extra budget when you going for an electric vehicle. So I've been driving an electric vehicle for like five years now. EVs are definitely a boon. That's a positive thing. I wouldn't say a bane, but it provides us with challenges. EVs, like heat pumps, like solar panels, ask for extra grid capacity, and we have to provide it. And that's one challenge. The other challenge is public infrastructure asks for extra connection, so for extra workforce, for extra materials, in a time frame where we also need to install a lot of solar and wind farms. So it puts a lot of pressure on the transport capacity in the grid, but also on the workforce making new connections. The move to EVs is always a good solution. It's also better to drive an EV. It's more quiet, it's nice. When you have driven an EV, you don't want to go back. Also in terms of pollution, in terms of emissions, it is helping the CO2 emissions, of course, but also when it's fueled on electricity, grey electricity, it is still the case that the pollution, nitrogen and particles, they are exhausted when electricity is produced in a conventional production plant, high in the air. But when it's coming out of an exhaust of a combustion engine, it still is on the ground. It still is near to the people, near to the animals, near to the plant. So it has much more damaging effect when it comes out of a car than it comes out of a chimney of a production plant. There are expected millions of EVs in the future. Already 3 to 4 million in 2035. That's the estimation. Yeah, that is challenging. These EVs are going to be charged in different places. So not every EV asks for a separate grid connection. There will be grid connections for fast charging along the highways. That this will call for workforce to make these grid connections. But it's not per se a big impact on grid capacity because it's on medium voltage level. When the connection is there, the capacity is also there. When you look at the low voltage level, that is where the most of the EV charging will be going on. There you have public chargers and private chargers, and these public chargers are also asking for new connections. And in the Netherlands, that's quite an amount. We park in our streets, so we need also connections in our streets. But the thing is with chargers on the private train, especially home chargers, is that the visibility of these things are low, and the cars will be charging here with 11 kilowatts, some more, some less, but it's around 11 kilowatts, and that's a big demand compared to a regular household. It's like 10 times that much, and that will be a challenge for us to firstly make visible what is the grid impact and then see what we can do about it. Extracting flexibility in terms of electric charging we call smart charging, but it's the same procedure. With EVs there is a lot of potential to state that first. I mean, the connection time is much more longer than the charging time. So there is a lot of room, especially in the night when you do home charging or you use a public charger for overnight charging. There is potentially an enormous amount of flexibility, and that is what we want to extract as DSO. Also as TSO, also the balance responsible parties need that flexibility, and that is key, I think, to decrease the needed grid extensions. We will for sure need grid extensions, but when we can do smart charging, we can postpone, delay grid extensions, and also create room for better planning of the grid extensions. And that is where smart charging comes in. DSOs can indeed create a marketplace for flexibility or do grid extensions, but there are solutions in between. So a marketplace is one way to extract flexibility, but you can also do bilateral contracts with the customer, or you can develop specific new tariffs to extract flexibility, or at least to motivate people to use their own energy for themselves and to decrease the peaks the EVs are now causing with dump charging, so to speak. We need grid extensions. We can decrease or postpone the amount of grid extensions by developing a new tariff system in which people, consumers, are motivated to do more self-consumptions and to decrease the peaks. We can develop bilateral contracts or a marketplace approach to call for flexibility when a DSO is in need of flexibility, and when we are in a trouble, in a real red situation, there's also congestion management rules which can also apply on a low voltage grid to decrease power demand of EVs. So there are multiple solutions in a kind of a ladder approach which could be applied by the DSO in the future. Next to electric mobility, you have electrification of heating. You have also the increase of decentralized production through solar panels, and these things all come together in the low voltage grid, and this problem is integrated. So the first thing we have to do, and we are in the process of that right now, is to improve visibility on these challenges in an integrated way, but also separately. So in an integrated way is to know when electrification of heating and mobility are making such a large demand that the grid cannot cope with it anymore. But also separately, because electrification of heating has less flexibility or another approach for flexibility extraction than EV. So first visibility, and then see how these developments are increasing, then get a picture of how can we extract flexibility in these developments. So that's insight, and for these insights we need more measurements in our grids to have more clear visibility on what's going on. And then to extract flexibility, the DSO or the DSO systems have to be able to communicate with these devices like an EV or a heat pump, or through the back office systems of these devices, and that is where integration comes in. So that's a very important thing to add, and that's what we're working on, for example, within Enexis and Milo. And net metering indeed is not motivating for self-consumption the way it is right now. And I believe, I'm sure it will change. I'm not sure when it will change and how big the steps in change will be, but it will change so that consumers are motivated to do more self-consumption. So this aspect is not future-proof. So when it's, for example, crowded on a grid, when there's already a lot of production, and when you feed in, then in the future it might be to a different price, or at least different rules of the game, so that you're motivated to do more self-consumption. The consumer is the consumer, so the consumer controls its devices. So technology is not the challenge anymore, so to speak. And there is still work to do in the integration of different devices, but the challenge is how to agree with the consumer that you can extract its flexibility for a certain amount of time, or in which way. And that is like a very new approach, at least for the DSO, to have this kind of conversations and this kind of agreements with the consumer. Another challenge is that when the DSO is in a congestion situation, it needs flexibility, for example in the evening, to decrease the demand peaks of the EVs. But also the TSO has more and more production, intermittent production, and he looks also at the demand side to adapt the demand side on the production to keep the grid on 50 Hertz. The balance responsible party has to be able to also to keep his portfolio in balance. So there are more stakeholders who are in need of flexibility, and those stakeholders' needs should be aligned, or at least they should not be contradictory. So there's also some rules of the game or better algorithms to develop. So it's not just integrate equipment, and there are other things to take care of also. The intelligence is needed in the first place to see what's going on in the grids. So we need more measurements, more sensoring to know if the demand or the production hits the capacity border, so to speak. That's one thing, and integration is needed to really extract the flexibility. So if we see, hey, we have a problem, we want to do something, agreements are in place, consumers are okay with extraction of flexibility for a certain compensation. Then integration is needed to really go from the situation, hey, we have a problem, we want to ask for flexibility. These devices, systems of the DSO and the devices who can provide flexibility must be integrated. So visibility, intelligence and integration is needed. It's the basic for flexibility extraction. And the potential is there for sure. It increases the flexibility potential in the system. But I believe with smart charging as such, so decreasing the demand, decreasing the evening peaks, we will also be able to, that will help already a lot, and connections are there to provide energy to the consumers. So it will definitely help vehicle to grid and and aggregate them into a virtual power plant. But it's also a matter of time, I would say. So if you first focus on smart charging in the first period, and after that we see what vehicle to grid or virtual power plants can do, and it will definitely help. It adds flexibility in the system. But how much that is in comparison with smart charging, that's still to be researched. Yeah, open standards are incredibly important. Not only in the field of electromobility, not only in the field of EV, but in every area where we want to do integration. So it also is important for heat pumps. It also is important for solar panel inverters. Within ELAD, we started out with a protocol between a back office and a charging station, OCPP. That was 10 years ago, and 10 years ago it was kind of strange to give up IPR on an interface, but in our vision it is IPR is on algorithms, is on software, but not on interfaces between devices. If you want to go for open, standardized protocols on these interfaces to make it possible that every device can connect with every back office system. If you don't have that, then you don't have inclusivity. So in terms that every device should be able to talk with every other back office system. If that is not open, then this integration will not work. So then when a DSO has a challenge or a TSO has a challenge, it can only then communicate with brand X or brand Y and not with every device. And that is not the system we want to have in the future. So it's in my perspective, a precondition for flexibility extraction.